Good afternoon and welcome to the Full Scottish on Sunday, the 20th of October. My name is Brian Liddy and I'm joined today by two guests. We've got Ronnie Cowan, the previous SNP MP for Inverclyde. Hello, good afternoon, Ronnie. And we've got Hugh
Hello,
Marshall.
Brian.
Thank you, Ronnie. And we've got Hugh Marshall, the founder of Talking Wales, with us again. Welcome to you both, and thank you for giving up a huge chunk of your weekend for being here.
No worries.
Today is the 970th day of the war in Ukraine, and so G7 defence ministers pledged unwavering support for Ukraine at the grouping's first ever ministerial meeting dedicated to defence. We underscore our intent to continue to provide assistance to Ukraine, including military assistance in the and long term, read the G7 defence ministers' final statement after the meeting in Naples. The statement also backed Kyiv's irreversible path to full Euro-Atlantic integration, including NATO membership. Earlier this week, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky pitched his victory plan to the EU and NATO, but failed to get the immediate membership invitation he was calling for. France's foreign minister pledged support for Zelensky's victory plan for ending the war with Russia, telling reporters in Kyiv on Saturday that he would work with Ukrainian officials to secure other nations' backing for the proposal. Kyiv's plan hopes to compel Russia to end its invasion of Ukraine through negotiations. President Zelensky's plan to end Ukraine's nearly three-year war with Russia has received mixed reactions from Western allies so far. Analysts say the Biden administration is unlikely to make a decision before the US presidential election on the 5th of November, as it may not appeal to voters. Ukraine's air defence units were in operation trying to repel a Russian air attack on Kyiv, the mayor of the Ukrainian capital said yesterday. Ukraine launched a series of drones targeting Moscow and western Russia, according to Russian officials early on Sunday. They said that there were no injuries or significant damage reported. A video purporting to show dozens of North Korean recruits lining up to collect Russian military fatigues has been released by Ukrainian officials, who say it shows the introduction of troops sent by Pyongyang into the conflict. The video, published by Ukraine's Center for Strategic Communications and Information Security, allegedly shows North Korean soldiers standing in line to pick up bags, clothing and other apparel from Russian servicemen. The centre said the footage was shot by a Russian soldier in recent days, but did not say how the footage was obtained. The location is unknown. US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin said he could not confirm reports that Korea has sent troops to Russia ahead of what could be a deployment to the war in Ukraine, but added such a move would be concerning if true. Ukraine Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiga warned on Saturday that the involvement of North Korean soldiers fighting for Russia carried a huge threat of further escalation, with the risk of going beyond the current borders and boundaries. UK Foreign Secretary David Lammy has raised concerns about China's support of Russia in its war against Ukraine on Friday. He urged his Chinese counterpart, Wang Yi, to prevent Chinese firms from supplying Russia's military in a meeting in Beijing. Ronnie, I'm wondering, is there anything in particular you'd like to highlight in today's update? Perhaps say something about the appearance of Korea?
Well, I think the first startling fact is you mentioned is over 900 days now. We all remember when this latest conflict kicked off. Obviously, it's been going on for a long, long time, but the most recent incursion from Russia. At the time, all the military strategists, and at that time I was an MP down at Westminster, and we were told quite categorically this will be over. This will be over in 2 or 3 weeks. Russia's going to walk right over Ukraine, then we've got to consider what our options are. But we're not in a position to intervene. We're not in a position to slow this down or even support Ukraine. And the people of Ukraine thought differently, and they dug in, and their heroism, their bravery, their commitment to maintaining their country's sovereignty has been way beyond, I think, what most of us thought it would be at the time. So now we're 900 days plus into it. And if the most recent news is to be believed in that not just North Korea, but China are getting behind Russia, then that's almost inconceivable that these three countries would amalgamate their forces to further threaten Ukraine's independence, Ukraine's sovereignty. And what does the West do if that comes to light? You mentioned the fact that we've seen North Korean soldiers been given uniforms. Is this just propaganda? Is it just something to make the West stand up and take notice? Is this the beginning of people saying, look, this is what we can do, so let's actually begin to start to negotiate some sort of way out of this, which would be the best outcome we can get? But at this moment in time, when you see those things happening and the countries playing games, it's a dangerous, dangerous situation to be in. And we have to stand solidly behind the people of Ukraine and reinforce our commitment to them that we won't allow their sovereignty to be challenged.
Thank you, Ronnie. Hugh, is there anything you want to say in response to what Ronnie had to say there?
Yeah, I think what's as well is going to play into this now is the election, the presidential election in the States that's happening in 2.5 weeks' time. That's going to have a massive bearing on what's happening. Um, if Trump wins, God knows, it's all bets off. Who knows what's going to go on? It was interesting to see that reports coming out of Canada showing that there were people suspected now of being sort of Russian assets within the US media. So yeah, I think that's going to have a huge bearing on it because obviously by the time um, the election's over and we actually know what the result is, it'll be 1,000 days. But it is worrying, and the fact that they're having to turn to North Korea, and obviously they're going to deny it. But the sooner the first body bag appears with a North Korean soldier, it's going to be a bit embarrassing for Russia, I would imagine.
Thank you, Hugh. I'm sure that the election in America is going to impact on the next item, which is the update on uh, the situation in Gaza and Israel. At least 42,519 Palestinians have been killed and 99,637 have been wounded in Gaza since the 7th of October, and more than 2,448 have been killed and 11,471 have been wounded in Lebanon. After the death of Yahya Sinwar, um, is it now time for a ceasefire in Gaza and Lebanon? A question that's been asked many times before now. Um, Hugh, I'm wondering, could you maybe say something about who Yahya Sinwar is, or just what you think about what's going on in Gaza?
Yeah, it was interesting, obviously, with sort of taking out the head of Hamas, and what was interesting was that it appears to have happened almost by accident. It was almost like a sort of a group of trainee soldiers who were sweeping through an area because obviously everybody thought that he was in a bunker hidden away, and he was sort of in a flat somewhere. I think we had Keir Starmer saying nobody should mourn, sort of his death, and I agree. Sort of Hamas, whatever the motivations were, October the 7th, trying to provoke a reaction. Well, it's got a reaction, so Hamas have to take large responsibility for what's happened. But I think that the big issue here is sort of people are calling for a ceasefire. I think what we're seeing now, and it's clear that day by day that it is a genocide. That they were saying that he was their main target. He was going to take him out, and that would sort of bring it to an end. Israel aren't going to end this war. They're going to carry on until basically Gaza is destroyed. And Netanyahu won't listen to anybody. But maybe if the West told him that they were going to stop supplying him with arms, maybe his ears would start working again all of a sudden.
Thank you, Hugh. Ronnie, I'm wondering, do you know anything more about Mr. Sinwar, and maybe mentioned the fact that Hugh brought in the word genocide, which is often brought in this conflict. What are your thoughts?
It's it's a situation. This is not news. Not we all know it. This did not happen. This did not start on the 7th of October. This goes back. It goes back to the Balfour Declaration. It goes back probably thousands of years of conflict in this area, which makes it incredibly complicated and deeply ingrained in the society itself. Terrorist organisations grow because people are being oppressed. Now, I'm no way, shape, or form am I condoning the horrific attacks that Hamas has uh, were responsible for on the 7th of October. The brutality was just off the scale, and I've got no truck with what they are doing. But the biggest recruiting sergeant for a future generation of Hamas is what Israel is doing right now to the people of Palestine. I'm old enough to remember I grew up in the 70s, and the IRA said their biggest recruiting sergeant was Bloody Sunday. After Bloody Sunday, young men who'd not had any truck with the IRA were lining up to volunteer to help in some way, shape, or form. So if you're a young kid in Palestine now and you've watched your family be bombed out of their house once, twice, three times, you've seen probably one of your parents been killed, you've maybe seen a family member being maimed, you could even be orphaned by this. And you're going to grow into that mindset where you just hate with every fibre of your body everything that is Israel. And that's perfect recruiting ground for Hamas going forward. So this idea that this action is going to end Hamas is totally wrong. So the situation that Israel are actually involved in right now, and I have to say, there's a lot of good people in Israel who are standing up against this as well. They want an immediate ceasefire. They want the return of the hostages, and they're protesting in the streets of Tel Aviv and in other cities in Israel as well. And the defence forces are turning on their own people. They are spraying them with this thing called skunk water, which makes them you smell, it breaks up the protest, and then after you've left the protest, you can be tracked down because you're literally the smell coming off, the odour coming off of you. So there's a good people within Israel who want to see the end of this now. And what we've got to do is cut through the Netanyahus of this world and get the people of Israel and the people of Palestine who want to create some sort of peace within the area and then build on that. But we've not been very good at doing that in the past, and I really do fear that all Israel is trying to do right here and right now is completely eradicate the state of Palestine. There's so no indication of any compassion whatsoever. They always go back to the argument that the Hamas are hiding behind men, women, and children. Therefore, those men, women, and children, whoever innocent they may be, have to die so as they can get to Hamas. And they've continued with this. But we in the United Kingdom are culpable. 15% of every F-35 that flies gets component, or 15% of the components are from the UK. We could stop those tomorrow. Very hard for us to tell Netanyahu what to do. Very hard for us to tell the people of Palestine what to do. But we can stop UK companies exporting those components. Without those components, the F-35s don't fly. If they don't fly, they're not bombing Palestine. And then, and only then, will maybe the state of Israel want to engage in some sort of conversation. The fact that we've continued to do this through this entire sorry affair of last year means that the United Kingdom, who could be doing something positive to bring around a ceasefire, are simply not doing it. And the question about why we're not doing it is very disturbing. If I go back to when Pinochet was in charge in Chile, and very famously we had the situation that was called Ne Passaran at the time, where the workers at Rolls Royce, the trade unions at Rolls Royce said, we're not going to supply this guy with these military components because he's using them on his own people. Well, we could do that now in the United Kingdom. We could stop supplying the components and start one small step towards bringing peace to the area. But while we stand back and try and negotiate with people who simply are not listening to any negotiations, they're buying time. And that time is being used to kill innocent men, women, and children day in and day out.
Thank you, Ronnie. And you're right. The SNP have been really, really, I mean, incredibly strong on their stand with Gaza. You just look at Hamza Yousaf, for example. But can I maybe ask you about John Mason and the SNP MSP in Holyrood? He's now independent because of comments that he's made about Gaza and what's going on there. Um, do you think it's right
Well,
that he's
John's not a stranger to controversial comments and other subject matter as well, and he made these comments and rightly was taken out of the party. I mean, we have a vigil in Europe every Saturday at 2 o'clock. We've been doing it for the best part of a year now, and that's a cross-party thing. They're local people, not members of the local Labour Party. None of their councillors attend, but we've got people there. It's cross-party or no party at all, where for every Saturday at 2 o'clock we meet and just stand as a vigil and talk and catch up in the news and bring awareness to the fact. And we get a very good reception, but we always get one idiot. Some guy walked by yesterday shouting abuse at us all. But by and large, the response we get from the ordinary man and woman in the streets is that we're doing the right thing and that we should be standing firmly behind Palestine.
Thank you, Ronnie. Hugh, I'm always probably going to ask you, are you hearing about this in Wales? I'm sorry, I'm being told to hurry up, but we've got to move on. So, West Streeting has suggested that overweight, unemployed people will be offered weight loss drugs to help them get back into work. But we're wondering, will there be sanctions for people who refuse to accept that? And I've also heard that there's been a connection made between depression and suicide for people that are currently on these drugs. Ronnie, is this something that you're uh, uh, aware of?
Yeah,
Forgive me.
it strikes me as being a headline policy with no real thought given to the process required. It is a 5 year trial that they're starting. They're talking about rolling out a 5 year trial. They're giving the pharmaceutical company involved almost £300 million to take it on. The issue is, I'm not honestly sure what they're trying to achieve from this. The medical experts, we're in a situation like this. I'm not an expert in pharmaceutical products at all, but I've had a quick look this morning to see what the people who are the experts are saying. And Dr. Simon Williams, a public health researcher, has said it's a sticking plaster. So I suspect he knows a lot more about this than Wes Streeting does. Professor Laura Heiser, who's an expert in human nutrition at the University of Aberdeen, the Rowett Institute, has said that guidelines for weight loss drugs in the UK state they can only be prescribed for 2 years. It should only be given to someone who is obese and has an accompanying health problem. So I'm not really sure who they think they're targeting here. The idea seems to be a sort of banner type thing of get these people back to work that are burdening the NHS, but it's far deeper than that. It's far more complex than that. And of course, we know that lots of drugs which are taken for one particular reason can cause other issues as well. And will this sort of treatment of people lead to mental health issues, which will then become another burden on the NHS? So I'm generally I've read the headlines, I've seen some of the detail, I heard Wes Streeting on telly this morning, and I just get feeling it's an easy thing to go after people who are currently out of work. And that's not unusual for the UK government to try and target people who are unemployed. But I think this is one really has taken a section of those people and said, we think you can be ostracised and used in a trial. And I genuinely don't know what sort of numbers they think they're going to get back to work and what they think they can save on this. And also, it's a trial. It's a trial of drugs on people, which always concerns me.
Thank you, Ronnie. Hugh, I was listening to LBC earlier this week, and James O'Brien and his callers all seem to be fairly on side with this. They said that it's not a quick fix, it's not a silver bullet or anything like that. They said that people that are on this treatment already, they have to like put in a lot of effort to lose weight. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I'm somebody who's sort of struggled with weight over the years, and yeah, it does have its benefits, but at the end of the day, sort of weight loss, it's a complex issue. It does come down to sort of managing your calorific intake and exercise is a combination. The science of it is quite simple. It's the psychological side of it, I think, that is quite complicated. But again, I just find that when streeting, he does seem to be sort of quite gimmicky. He
Mm.
likes sort of coming out with sort of sound bites as opposed to sort of long-term policies. I think, yeah, obviously anything to do because it's not just sort of unemployed people, but sort of obesity is behind, I think, 50% of hospital admissions. So clearly, it's something that needs to be dealt with. But the fact that they're trying to vilify sort of unemployed and targeting a section of society that the Daily Mail love to hate. It does concern me. Sort of the Labour Party is supposed to be party of the working people, but it's almost as if this them and us. If you're not working, then you're not as valuable to society as other parts, and that to me is disturbing. I think Labour have lost their way into that respect.
Thank you, Hugh. Ronnie, this news from Wes Streeting and to do with Labour and the NHS, it seems to be part of a. It's almost like a part of a bundle. It's like every time that Wes Streeting says something about what's going to happen in the NHS, opening it up to do things differently. What do you think about Labour's handling of the NHS in general? Is this um,
Well, the closest comparator, we're 100 days or so into a UK Labour government, but we've had a Labour government in charge in Wales for quite some time, and their handling of the NHS has been quite shocking. So maybe West Street is looking at that and thinking we've got to do things completely different than we did in Wales. But as you said, a lot of it is these policies, I call them banner policies, with here's the big words, this is what we're going to do, and there's no real thought behind them as to how they're going to see them through or how they're going to fund them or even what the consequences of them are going to be. But they know they work well with the electorate. That's how the UK government got into power in the first place. They made all these promises to people, all the things, the great things they would do, all the change they're going to bring around. But 100 days, and yes, it's only 100 days, we're seeing more promises. If they said, "Oh, we've done this," but actually look at it, you haven't done it yet. You're maybe starting the ball rolling, but you haven't achieved it yet. They keep on saying we've changed this, but the bill's maybe on its second reading. There's a long, long way to go still. So they're very quick to step up and say, "This is what we've done, and this is what we want to happen." But in actual measuring the results of what they've done, and the NHS is a very good example. Measuring the results, we can only at this moment in time look at Wales and say, well, did you get that right there? And that's just clearly no.
Thank you, Ronnie. And Hugh, the last time we spoke here on, I think it was the Full Scottish, once we'd gone off air, we continued to chat, and you brought up something that I really wished had been aired on show. Can you maybe recall what that was? And to do
Yeah,
with
I
Labour?
think we were discussing. I think again, what Ronnie was saying, we're discussing sort of the health situation in Wales and Scotland, and it's quite interesting how in Scotland, Labour are quite keen to sort of point out the sort of how the Scottish health service is performing. But when you compare it with Wales, Wales is behind on almost every single comparator. And what was interesting as well this week is that Welsh Labour were trying to point out that what they've been doing with dentistry, for example, that we're going to use as an exemplar for the rest of the UK, and so obviously the society that sort of looks after dentitions said that it's absolute nonsense. Sort of Wales isn't a good example of dentistry in the UK. And also this week, we had Welsh Labour saying, they're working with English Labour to work across borders to sort of share experience and knowledge and share capacity. But then the Welsh First Minister came out and said, well, there is no capacity. So again, they're making these statements about things they're going to do. But in reality, as soon as you sort of scratch away at the surface, there's no substance to it at all.
Thank you, Hugh. And I think we've still got a couple of minutes. I've been hearing a lot of people kind of talking about this announcement by Streeting about this drug um, or these injections being a bit like in a kind of dystopian sci-fi novel. Hugh, do you think there's are they right to think that, or is there a role? Can it be
I,
used?
I think, yeah, I think there is a role, and I know people, who are using it and are having great success. And there's also, we're talking about side effects. It does have side effects, talking to people who've taken it, but it also has additional health benefits that people didn't realise. But it is very, very expensive. If you were buying this from, online, it's £250 a month. So it's and obviously in Wales and Scotland where prescriptions are free, then that cost is going to have to be taken over. But I think as somebody again, I contacted my GP over a year ago to ask for support around sort of weight loss, because obviously if I was able to have those medicines for free, then it would be a huge benefit. But I've been waiting over a year for a referral to a sort of a weight loss clinic, and I haven't had anything. So I think again, it just goes to show you the actual resources that are there now to support people with losing weight are overburdened and can't cope because they just haven't got the staffing and the manpower. So maybe that's where Streeting should be concentrating, in England. And remember again, when Streeting talks about the NHS, he's talking about in England only. And if they come up with and this is the issue, with Barnet and with devolution is, we're basically in Scotland and Wales, we're just administrating on behalf of whichever government is in Westminster. They decide things, and then we then, as a result of that, get extra funds, and then we can decide what to do with that funding. So we're not in a position in Wales and Scotland to make decisions ourselves. It all depends on what West Streeting sort of thinks of this week and how that has a knock-on effect fiscally. So it's, we need to remember, that from a devolution perspective.
Thank you, Hugh, for being so honest about that, about your personal situation there. And Ronnie, we've maybe got a minute left. Hugh mentioned how this is going to impact on um, uh, Scotland, and I was talking to somebody on the show here and said people really do want to work. Can you maybe just really quickly maybe say something about how this might impact on Scotland?
Well, the honest answer is we just don't know because we really don't know what this plan is all about. Streeting said this morning, I quote him correctly, that he's not interested in some dystopian future where I involuntarily jab unemployed people who are overweight. So what are you interested in ways? That's really the question. And the effect to Scotland will be none. As far as I can see from the current plans, it won't affect Scotland whatsoever. But if they're spending more money in the NHS, then there should be a knock on to the Barnet consequence, and we should be able to choose how we spend that money to address the specific health problems that we have here in Scotland. But it should be about addressing health problems rather than this caveat of it's we getting people back to work.
Thank you, Ronnie. And so this week, Ed Miliband appeared in Aberdeen, but he's failed to convince oil and gas workers that they will not end up on the scrap heap like the miners did under Thatcher. So we're wondering here today in Cowcaddens, with energy being reserved to the United Kingdom Parliament in Westminster, what does the UK government have to do, and what can devolved governments do to protect jobs and move to green energy and reduce energy demands? Ronnie, I'm going to come to you first on this because it seems a while since we heard you speak. What's happening in terms of Grangemouth, for example?
Well, Westminster was always slow to get behind renewable energies. We had back in the Cameron days, he dissed green energy and green policies in general, and we pushed ahead with them in Scotland because we realised the benefit. We also realised that we are very, very fortunate in the natural resources we have in Scotland lend themselves to renewable energy. And what we're seeing now is the UK government catching up with that idea, but at the same time, they have to be very careful in how we transition away from the traditional oil and gas. You cannot just shut this off overnight. Uh, and so they're starting to talk about that, but they're not talking about it very well. And because of that, the oil and gas workers, particularly as you said up in Aberdeen, don't trust what they're being told. We've got a UK government which is, and when in opposition, were famous for the number of U-turns they did. So frankly, when they stand there and say, this is what we're going to do, you tend to think, oh yeah, what are you going to be saying next week? And what the oil and gas industry needs is a path where the people who've got skill sets to operate in that sector right now can transition over time into working in the renewable energy sector. And that's where we've got to go. Within Scotland, we are a powerhouse when it comes to renewable energy, and we should be benefiting from it. What the Scottish government can do right now in terms of offsetting the damage that's coming from Westminster is very, very limited because, as we all know, powers devolved or powers retained, and Westminster can reach over and change that. And I'm going to say the blindingly obvious here from a member of the SNP and a previously elected member of the SNP, the only way we will ever fully control all our natural resources and be able to transition as smoothly and as efficiently as we need to is through complete independence from the United Kingdom.
Thank you, Ronnie. And Hugh, I'm just reminded that there seems to be a similar parallel in Wales at the moment. I'm thinking of the steelworks
Yeah.
at Port Talbot. I mentioned Grangemouth in Scotland. Is this part of a pattern?
Definitely. When you look at Port Talbot, it was in the run up to the general election. We were being told that a new Labour government would come in and things would be different. We did get a Labour government come in, and nothing did change. They closed the blast furnaces. The last blast furnace closed a week ago. So that's gone now. And again, we're giving Tata, an Indian company, hundreds of millions of public funds in order to sort of build these electric arc furnaces. Sort of jobs are going to be lost. There's a lot of work going on in Port Talbot at the moment. It's local to me. It's something that that I'm sort of working on from a news perspective there, in order to sort of help the community have a voice and be informed. But again, I know it's only been 100 days or 100 and plus days of Labour, but there are things that they could have done when they came in immediately, that they haven't done. And I think this business of GB Energy. I think Starmer was being interviewed on Scottish radio this week, where he was being asked about how much energy it would generate and how it would bring costs down, and he just admitted it's a vehicle for sort of investment that's going to bring in private investment. So it's an investment fund. It's not an energy company. And again, it's this misleading people of thinking that we could have an energy company. We could nationalise power, but they don't want to do these things that people would support and want to. It's almost as if they're terrified of sort of big business, the oil and petrol lobby. I don't know what it is, but it's just disappointing.
Thank you, Hugh. And while we're talking about this, Ronnie, we've got a minute left. I'm kind of struggling with this. We're talking about fossil fuel, Port Talbot, steel making, Grangemouth, oil, and yet we're trying to protect jobs and renewables. And where does is it oil and water and the mix?
Is well, yeah, I've said for some time that water will be the new oil because it's such a resource that the planet depends upon to exist. And We're very fortunate in Scotland. We don't always like our climate, but we are very fortunate that we've got clean, renewable water all year round practically. We've got more water than we know what to do with, and it's going to become a resource. It's going to be a resource which we can sell on to other countries that we can use responsibly. So we have to protect that as well. But the Grangemouth issue is should be front and central in this discussion because we produce over 95% or something of the oil and gas of the United Kingdom, and yet when Grangemouth shuts, we won't have an oil refinery in Scotland. I mean, what other nation can you possibly draw that parallel to? And this is something that's been deliberately being done. You know, 5 refineries, I think, in England. So why are they not closing one of them and putting money, or why not supporting the one in Grangemouth, as they said they'd do during the general election? You know, and of course, this GB Energy is the banner they hide behind, which is going to solve all those problems. But as we all know, GB Energy won't create any energy. It wouldn't be involved in development of energy. It's going to be an investment arm for companies, rich companies, to get richer.
Thank you, Ronnie. Um, the next item is basically the UK economy, I guess. We've got national insurance contributions, employers' contributions, and fiscal drag, cuts to universal credit, disability benefits, pensioners' winter fuel payments are being touted by the Chancellor. Can the UK survive austerity 2.0? Rachel Reeves needs to find £35 billion, somewhere between £35 billion and £50 billion. The budget is coming up on the 30th of October in 2 weeks' time. You've got health, defence and education are all protected, which means that they're not going to tax the rich. Labour says, so that means that we're going to be facing austerity. Hugh, I think I'm meant to come to you first on this. What's your thoughts on how Labour's going to tackle this?
Yeah, I think until we know what's in the budget, it's interesting. I've never seen a budget before with so much sort of leaking of sort of tasters of what's going to be in it. It's almost as if that sort of testing the water through the media before announcing stuff. But as I understand it, I think the final budget had to be sort of submitted on Friday, so that the sort of the reports, the fiscal reports, could be done to make sure that the numbers added up. But again, this business of a black hole, it's nonsense. It's this sort of old-fashioned economics and treating sort of public spending as if it's a household budget, and it's really frustrating when you get politicians doing that, because they're not the same. I have a household budget, but I don't have the power to print money. So there are fundamental differences there with how sort of economies work. But it's just I don't know. Is Rachel Reeves out of a depth? They've had months and years to plan for this. And it's almost as if they've come into power in June, and it's like, oh, we didn't know any of this. We didn't know what to expect. They knew the situation exactly, and the black hole stuff is just nonsense, just to cover themselves, because I don't. They just haven't got a plan. When you think back and you listen to the general election campaign, it was all about putting the party back into the service of working people. And I see that sort of Labour politicians have been sharing on social media, and again, one of these nonsensical, sort of change begins, working people, sort of memes, and it's all just sound bites and no sort of real policy. The fact is, local authorities are facing huge financial issues. I'm a school governor, and schools are running at deficits this year, which means that the only way they're going to be able to recoup that money over the coming years is by losing sort of teaching staff. But nobody seems to be discussing this, and there's no sort of guarantees that this government are going to come in and say, right, we're going to fund local authorities. One thing in their favour, they have said that they're going to give local authorities, I think it's a 3-year funding deal rather than an annual one, which allows them to plan, which is a good thing, but they need more money.
Thank you, Hugh. Ronnie, I can't help thinking, from what Hugh's saying, I can't help thinking about the situation in Scotland. It's the Labour government in Westminster, they say they're going to raise taxes not on the rich, but on ordinary people. They say they won't borrow. The budget's coming up on the 30th of October this month. Holyrood can't set its budget until Westminster announces its budget, and Holyrood can't borrow. So how? I don't know what this thing about austerity 2.0 and can we survive? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think one of the points you made there, that the Scottish Parliament, Scottish Government cannot set its budget until Westminster have. So that's the way of it. We're sort of used to that. It's not the scenario we'd like to have, but we understand that, we know that. So there'll be a lot of looking and a lot of trying to judge what is going to happen at Westminster. Hugh's right, the media will trail stories at the behest of the government. If they'll find a friendly hack and say, we're thinking about doing this, and then they'll gauge response to that. And on very rare occasions, they go, oh, no, we were never going to do that. That's just been misreported. And the reporter will be rewarded with more stories and more inside information later on in the year. That tends to happen. But what we're looking at now, the sort of things are trailing now, and the interest in employers' national insurance contributions. And I heard it was Keir Starmer talking about this, and he said, we're not going after working people, but it's an employer. This is small businesses. This is people who maybe employ 3, 4, 5 people, a business they've built up from the ground. They've probably mortgaged their houses to run their own businesses. I've been there. I was a small business owner, and I know what it's like when those prices go up. And if they're going to increase national insurance contributions, that makes it harder for people to employ people. And therefore, you've got somebody else who's unemployed and having to be supported by the state. It's not nonsensical. We should be creating an environment for small businesses where it encourages them to employ people and take on apprentices and take on people who are maybe been made redundant in their 50s or whatever. And we're just not doing that. We're still looking at businesses to an extent where we see them as some sort of cash cow. And the hypocrisy behind this is that the massive major companies who are not paying the sort of taxation they should be paying, they get away with it. But it's the small businesses we're going to go after here. And I think I have to understand it. We take all those small businesses together, the amount of people they employ in the society, and also if it's a small local business, the people they're employing locally and the money they then spend in the local economy, that small circular economy, is hugely important. And I just think this is another one of the things to say, well, where can we raise this money from? And they see it as an easy option. I was hoping they'd trail this and then people would come down on like a ton of bricks and they'd back off from it. But I don't see them backing off from it. I generally think they think this has been a really, really clever idea they've had. And going back to the point you made, what's particularly disturbing is that they didn't just come to power on the 5th of July as a surprise. We knew the polling from last November there was going to be a general election sometime this year and Labour were going to form the government at Westminster. So they've had all this time to sit down and work on things and try on things and talk to experts and engage with them and develop policies which are going to work. And you just get the feeling that it's all just falling apart all around them with the likes of Sue Gray leaving and stuff like that. You think, where are they coming from? Why are they not more solid? I'm a Scottish National Party member and ex-elected member, and I've got no real love for the Labour Party to succeed in this because I want Scottish independence. But I understand the damage they are doing to society, and first and foremost, put all the party politics aside. First and foremost, as a UK government, they should be creating a society which is fairer and more equal. And if they are doing that, I would say hands up, well done, guys, because that's the sort of Scotland I want to live in. But they aren't. They're playing games to be popular with a certain section of the electorate. And unfortunately, it's going to damage the people who are the most vulnerable in society as we head into winter here in Scotland. I'm looking out the window here in Europe. There's a storm coming in, I'm told. It's getting cold. Central heating's been pumped up this week. I'm very lucky. I hopefully can afford to pay my energy bills. A lot of people cannot. And that's a sad fact in this day and age that people They are going to be asking themselves the question of what can I afford to do this week? Can I heat my house? Can I put food on the table? And that's where government should be the heart of and try to help people. And I just don't see it come out of this government, and I don't see anything trailed in the budget that tells me that's actually that's what they want to achieve.
Thank you, Ronnie. Hugh, just briefly before we move on to the last item, Ronnie talked about kind of the Tories in disarray, but it sounds like Labour's also in disarray. You also mentioned Scotland. I think you said Scotland being a cash cow. Do you ever hear Wales being talked about in the same way? And we're also in the running order. I really should mention to people at home. There's talk about we were all quite shocked about in the general election. Farage and the Reform Party, they got, if we had PR in Westminster, they would have a lot more MPs at the moment. So maybe I'm kind of asking you two questions at once. Forgive me. Maybe I should ask you to respond to what Ronnie had to say from Wales.
Yeah, no, I think in Wales it's slightly sort of in reverse. Obviously, we haven't had some years of oil and gas sort of revenues that we can sort of claim as sort of share of the economy. What we do have, sort of natural resources, water, obviously, and now with renewables, sort of energy is coming into the mix. But I think it's perceived that Wales is, sort of the poor relation. I think it was George Thomas who said, if Wales, was independent, we'd have to go with our begging bowl to Westminster. But Wales has the potential, but it's just it's not being fulfilled. And what was interesting, there was a discussion on the radio in Wales this morning around Barnett formula being unfair, talking to a Welsh Labour MP about sort of fair funding for Wales with the budget coming up, but saying that but there's other pressing things that need to be sorted out. So things like the Barnett formula is a fundamental that needs sorting, and it's something that that Labour needs to sit down. They have to stop with this sort of, the health service is a priority. They can do these things. They can do things, multiple things at the same time, but they always find an excuse not to do things from a Welsh and Scottish perspective, because there are other more important things to do. And I think the interesting thing, just going on to the point about Farage, is obviously we got the elections in Wales and Scotland and Holyrood and the Senedd in 2026. Both being fought under PR. I think in Scotland, Reform haven't got the foothold that they have got in England, in Wales. But if it was, if there was an election today, that Reform would be probably, the third party behind Labour and Plaid Cymru. So again, if people want to vote for that, then that's their choice. The trouble is, they're a party that offer nothing. They're a party that just sort of basically feeds off people's fears. They don't offer any solutions. They just sort of want to stop things. So it is worrying, because obviously you need for a Senedd and a Parliament to work properly, you need good people in there who understand, what they're doing and doing things for the right reason, and not having a bunch of freeloaders who, we know they'll just be useless.
Thank you, Hugh. The last item today is Alex Salmond, who died on Saturday in North Macedonia after having suffered a heart attack. Hugh, I'm conscious that Plaid Cymru paid tribute to Alex Salmond. They said, on behalf of Yes Cymru and all those in Wales who seek the right to shape our own destiny, we extend our gratitude to Alex Salmond. So there's a Welsh element to this story too. Ronnie, I'm kind of, this week I've been thinking a lot about the word repatriation, Mr. Salmon's body was repatriated to Scotland. He came back home to Scotland after a private individual had paid for the flight. There was it seemed to me, a huge difference between when Mr. Salmon's body set off from Macedonia with what reminded me of the kind of repatriation that we've seen over the years from Vietnam, and when American uh, military personnel have been repatriated back to the United States with stars and stripes draped over coffins and the like, and huge, very solemn ceremonial um, uh, uh, occasions. And then when we saw the footage from Aberdeen, when it was like three men in a trolley and a saltire blowing in the wind. Is there a difference between how Alex Salmond was perceived internationally and how he's been perceived here at home?
Wow, I mean, Alec died a week ago last Saturday, and it was a shock to everybody that knew him. He was only 69. He's been around for a long time in Scottish politics from his early 30s. Certainly, I was aware of him from then on. And he will leave a huge hole, but he also leaves a great legacy of the work he's done for Scotland, and we should be incredibly proud of that. And Alex and his family should be as well. How do we perceive Alex Salmond? I worked with him before I was an MP. I campaigned in Europe with him in previous elections. I was a colleague beside him from 2015 to 2017. And as a colleague and as a political force, he was fantastic to work with. His knowledge, his ability, his sense of timing. He had a way of manipulating debates and controlling a chamber with what appeared to be very little input, but he knew when to get involved and what words to say. He wasn't one for grandstanding as such. I don't remember him at Westminster making huge long speeches and boring everybody. He knew when to get in and he knew where to land the punches. Uh, is he respected for that in Scotland? Is he understood for that in Scotland? I honestly don't know. I think the action, I mean, here locally in Gourock, we're having a by-election for the council, and the Alapa, I think, certainly SNP, the Conservatives, we all suspended our campaigning for 3 or 4 days. The Labour Party didn't. And I think that's an issue of Alex will always be a figure of hate to people, some people, certainly not all, to some people within the unionist movement. And that's maybe been reflected also in some aspects of the media who are wanting to make other stories out of this, which is completely the wrong time to be doing this. Right now, we're talking about a man who was the First Minister of Scotland, who should be treated with respect that that position demands and he has earned. And I saw what was happening in North Macedonia. They treated him with great respect and courtesy, and I'd like to thought the same thing could have happened here in Scotland as well.
Thank you, Ronnie. And to be fair, I mean, there is going to be a proper formal ceremony at some point in the near future to honour Alex Salmond. But Hugh, this thing about repatriation, Broadcasting Scotland put together, I thought, what is the best that I have seen of a tribute to Alex Salmond. I would recommend it to viewers at home if you haven't caught it already on our YouTube channel. Yes, last night on Friday, on Friday night, it really was very measured, and people were being asked, when did you first meet Alex Salmond, and what did he mean to the movement? But this idea about repatriation, and there's been a lot of talk about, is Mr. Salmond's death going to mean that the independence movement can be brought together? You're in Wales, which you've got a slightly different angle, and I know you support an independent Wales, but do you think that Alex Salmond's death, or Mr. Salmond's death, could impact favourably on the independence movement in Scotland and therefore in Wales?
Yeah, I think obviously the independence movement in Wales has been influenced greatly by what's been happening in Scotland, and Alex Salmond was a driving force behind that. I remember as a sort of a youngster, seeing him on Question Time, and he was one of those rare politicians who would be on Question Time, and he would get the most applause from the audience, regardless of where the Question Time, because he did speak a lot of sense. Obviously, in recent years, with the way that things happen with the SNP, it is sad, and it does happen in politics, and it did have an impact on his influence. But his legacy, I think, will continue. I think from a Welsh perspective, you know, yeah, clearly, it's been in the news, and it's something that people have been discussing here, because he was one of those figures who did transcend sort of UK politics. That we know of prime ministers, past and present, but people like Salmond, um, are people who are instantly recognizable, and in these days of politics where people don't even know who the home secretary is, that says a lot about the man.
Thank you, Hugh. You mentioned legacy. Ronnie, I'd like to ask you about Mr. Salmon's legacy. Um, One of those things that we've heard people talking about. You hear people talking about legacy, and often they just say legacy, and there's nothing concrete maybe mentioned after that. 2014, Alex Salmond brought about the referendum. He got support for independence up to 45%. Leslie Riddick made an interesting point that she said that Salmond used devolved planning powers to veto new nuclear plants, and at the same time approved the expansion of onshore wind. While it was banned by the Tories in England for almost a decade, now this year, more than 100% of Scottish electricity was produced by renewable energy for the first time. So that could be seen as one of Alex Salmond's legacies. But I don't know. Do you have anything to add to that?
I mean, Alec was an operator. He was a smart guy, and I said he was always planning. He was always looking further down the line. He would be putting things in place today, which you wouldn't see the benefit of until maybe a year, 2 years down the line. He wasn't afraid to do that, and that's the example you're talking about there. You do these things, and I certainly did them where you think this will be beneficial. People might not appreciate it immediately, but if you're one of a historian, look back and say, why are we benefiting from this now? Who put who planted that seed 5 years ago, 10 years ago? And in a lot of situations, people look back at it and say, you know what? It was Alex Salmond, and it was the people that Alex surrounded himself with. He didn't do it alone, he was first to admit that, because when we went into the referendum campaign, which he announced in 2012, so it was a 2 year project. That's a perfect example. We're going to do this. We're going to have this referendum in 2012. He said that, and it was 2 years later, which gave us all that time to take that vote up to 45% here locally in Inverclyde. It was somewhere between 23 and 26 when we started that campaign. But we've been working together as a united movement for Scottish independence. We nudged it all the way to 45 nationally, and we lost it in Inverclyde by 86 votes. We got 49.999%. And Alec was a huge part of that. He was at the centre. We built a campaign around the man, his character, but really importantly, his nuance. How he could plan things, how he understood things, the cause and effect that he looked at, and that's away from just the front of we saw the guy, the image of Alex Salmond, the real political genius of the guy that worked in the background. Yeah.
Thank you, Ronnie. And just on that, I would thoroughly recommend Broadcasting Scotland's special on a tribute to Alex Salmond. They talk about his immense ability to his knowledge and being. Personally, I remember just watching Alex Salmond being interviewed by journalists, and they would throw him a barbed question, and he seemed to be able to take that barbed question and sharpen it and polish it and make it even more pointed and throw it back at them and say, well, are you saying that that means then that Scotland shouldn't be able to do whatever the question was about. Incredible politician. That thing about legacy and people looking back, Ronnie, I'm just going to come to you quickly before we're out of time, but that thing about legacy, do you think that one of a future legacy of Alex Salmond will be bringing together the currently fractured independence movement?
Well, I sincerely hope so. Uh, Obviously, Alec isn't there to actually do the job himself now, but there are, as you say, there are factions. There are even now there are people who are arguing over this very subject matter. If we allow ourselves to be divided, then we will continue to be conquered. And I think I understood that. So we have to get to a situation where we can put all our differences aside, focus on what's the most important thing for Scotland, not just for now, but for 10, 15, 20 years down the line. And that requires an independence movement which is united in our cause. When I started the SNV back in 2012, I was already a member of the SNP, and I stopped going to SNP meetings because I said this movement here has to embrace anybody and everybody who can contribute to it in a constructive manner, and that's what we built. And I think nationally that was happening in different areas as well. And that's nationally, that's what we have to do if we're going to succeed. We cannot allow ourselves to be divided.
Thank you, Ronnie. I'm going to be cheeky because we are out of time. But if you agree that a future legacy of Mr. Salmond could be a reunited independence movement, just practically, how is that going to come about? What
It's
can be
going to
done?
require It's going to require people backing off from the social media arguments, backing off from the criticisms and the anger, and getting behind closed doors and sitting down with a little bit of respect for each other and starting to understand each other better and talking like adults and not doing it all in the public eye, not doing it all in the glare of publicity. We have to be able to sit down with people and understand that the cause is far bigger than any one of us, is far bigger than any one party. Yes, the SNP is by far the biggest party right now in Scotland in terms of independence movement, but if we're going to win this vote next time round, and I genuinely believe that we will win it next time round, we have to bring in people from other parties and no political parties. Right now, one of the most concerning things in Scottish politics is that we've gone away from that high of the 2014 referendum and fewer people were turning out to vote. The general election was down about 10%. The council elections, by-elections are going on right now. Something like 22, 23% of people feel engaged enough to vote. We have to work on that and make people understand that their vote actually matters and their opinions matter and what they want actually matters. It's not about the big names. It's not about the political parties. It's about the people of Scotland. And that happens by people getting together and discussing these matters in an open and honest but responsible and respectful manner. And we need more of that. I was at an event through in Edinburgh. Was it last Saturday? I can't remember. It was about 14 different nations were all represented there. And we were talking about how small a nation. We're talking about the Basques, the Catalonias. We're talking about the parts of Italy and what have you. And we're saying, how do we move this forward? How do we get our voices heard? And a lot of it was about respect. And I think we have to have some more respect for each other within the independence movement and stop trying to use each other as a fodder.
Thank you, Ronnie. Hugh, I risk the anger of both you and Ronnie by holding you back and from getting on with your weekend and with my colleagues here in the studio. But just with what Ronnie said there, and my question, what practically can be done? What's your advice to Scotland at the moment, now that we've lost Mr. Salmond?
I think it makes people realise that politics and sort of things like independence it's more than just about individuals. I think the focus has been too much on individuals in the past. I think we need to be thinking about what independence means and just delivering that message to people, what it can achieve. It was quite ironic. We had the Welsh First Minister visiting Ireland this week and meeting the president and having discussions about co-working with them. Ireland are in a position to do things because they're an independent country, and the things that the Welsh First Minister wanted to do, she hasn't got the powers to do. So I think we need to focus, I think, on what it means, what it can deliver, what are the outcomes. I think there has been too much of a focus on individuals and personalities.
Thank you, Hugh. And as we're out of time, then I better say that is it for this week's Full Scottish. Before we go, we just want to say that remind you that here at Broadcasting Scotland, we depend on the generosity of you, our supporters. To everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment, we thank you very much. We face costs of over £4,000 every month, but we receive donations of around £2,500. We urgently need more regular subscribers, but we need to clear our debts as well. We are at crisis point and we really need your donations right now to be able to afford to pay our bills and survive. A really good example, I can't stress it enough, of what Broadcasting Scotland can do at short notice is the tribute to Alex Salmond on Friday evening instead of the Scotland at 7. We can do that when we have the resources. That includes volunteers as well as subscriptions. Our programmes will always be free to view. However, if you can afford £5 a month, please do consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter and donate whatever you can afford. Thank you to you at home for watching. Thank you to Hugh Marshall from Wales again. Thank you, and to Ronnie from Greenock for your time this weekend. I'm sorry we've gone over time, but I'll let you go, and thank you to viewers at home. We'll see you later this week.